Nearly 1,000 people had crammed themselves into Coconut Grove Nightclub in Boston, Massachusetts on the night of November 28, 1942, many of them having just watched Boston College have their national championship hopes crushed by their hated rival Holy Cross earlier in the day. The problem was the max capacity for the Coconut Grove was 460 people, meaning they were 2 times what was legally allowed to be inside the nightclub. Sometime after 10 p.m., an individual down in the Melody Lounge unscrewed a light bulb over his and his date's head to give them more privacy. A passing 16-year-old busboy was instructed to screw the light bulb back in, climbed up on a chair, put a match out of his pocket, lit it, and then used it to see the light bulb, screwed it back in, and then climbed back down. As soon as he stepped down, he heard someone behind him yell fire. He turned around and saw that the paper palm tree he had just been underneath was now on fire up near the ceiling. No sooner had he realized there was a fire, a blue fire flashed across the ceiling, and the satin fabric hanging from the top of the ceiling began to burn rapidly. As the fire rapidly spread across the ceiling, many individuals ran for the only known exit in the basement, the stairs up to the first floor. But almost as soon as the majority of them got there, the fire reached there at the same time, and many individuals burned to death on the stairs. As the fire spread up the stairs, it came out of the stairwell as a massive fireball, sending many of the people on the first floor rushing for the exit that was the revolving door at the front of the club. Unfortunately, it quickly became trapped and jammed with bodies, forcing it to be unable to move, trapping many people who began to burn alive in the doorway. In other areas of the club, the other doors to the exterior were either locked or inward swinging, which caused even more crowd crushes, and there were several areas where individuals became confused as to which way led to an exit, ran into each other, and they were overcome by fumes before they were able to escape. The superheated gases and smoke moved so quickly in some areas that several people didn't even have a chance to get up from their seats and died right where they were sitting with their hands still around their glasses. In the end, 492 people would die in the Coconut Grove Nightclub Fire, nearly half of those who were in the club at the time the fire started. Now, the official cause determination from the Boston Fire Department was ruled undetermined for this fire, but over the years there have been several causes put forward as potentials for this fire. One is that the busboy accidentally ignited the palm trees and it spread from there. One is that an air conditioning unit behind the Melody Lounge leaked methyl chloride, which then was ignited by an electrical fault in the air conditioning unit. And then one that I believe is most likely is that the busboy accidentally ignited a methyl chloride leak that was in the ceiling that ignited the fire. In the end, the owner of the club would be convicted of 19 counts of manslaughter and be sentenced to 12 to 15 years in prison. He would serve 4 before being pardoned, but upon his release, he told reporters that he wished he died in the fires with the others. He then died of cancer 9 weeks later. Yep, it's a whiteboard video. So, on the night of November 28th, 1942, we have our Melody Lounge here. This is the Melody Lounge. It is the basement of the Coconut Grove. Set up here, we have stairs in this corner here. We have a bar with a rotating piano up on a pedestal in the middle of the bar. And then surrounding it, we have various decorations all around. So there's a palm tree up here in this corner. There's a palm tree in this corner. There's a palm tree right in here. There's a palm tree over here. There's a palm tree over here. All of these palm trees are made out of paper. And inside the paper where they have the coconuts are light bulbs that produce light to provide some kind of ambiance to the area. Now, the Melody Lounge in general was relatively dark. It's the part of the club where everybody took their dates for privacy and romanticism and all of that fun stuff. Now, this entire bar was packed, fully packed. There were 1,000 people in the club overall. There were only supposed to be about 460 in the entire Coconut Grove. There were approximately 400 people in this particular area of the club alone. Now, on the night of the fire, an individual sitting in this corner reached up above him and unscrewed the light bulb in the coconut to give himself and his date some more darkness, essentially. And a busboy walked by and said, "Hey, you can't do that." Told the bartender. Bartender said, "Hey, go screw it back in." So the busboy walks over here. He grabs a chair. He stands up on the chair, gets up there, realizes he can't see the light bulb at all. So he pulls a match out of his pocket, lights it, holds it up there so that he can screw it back in, steps back down, puts the match out underneath his foot, starts to walk away. Someone behind him screams and says, "Hey, there's a fire." He turns around and the entire portion of this palm tree right here is on fire. Now, no sooner had he turned around, he watched the fire spread quickly in all directions across the ceiling of the bar. Now, the thing you have to understand is that multiple witnesses to the fire who saw him stand up on the chair, light the match, stick it up there, climb back down, said that the initial fire was in the palm tree and then all of a sudden it flashed blue across the ceiling. Now, normally fires don't burn blue, but because this was World War II, they had air conditioning inside the Cocoanut Grove. But the majority of Freon was being used by the Army and the Navy and the Marines in order to provide air conditioning for the troops. So civilians back in the US had to make do with other things, primarily methyl chloride, which was inside an AC compressor unit just on the other side of the wall right here. Now, methyl chloride is flammable, and when it burns initially, it burns the blue color. The problem is methyl chloride is heavier than air, which means that if there was a leak from this unit right here, it should have sunk to the ground. The thing is, there was a suspended ceiling above the Melody Lounge. They had put in blue satin cloth all the way across the ceiling to give it a little more of an ambiance rather than just being a wood ceiling. They had lowered it on wooden supports and then put the cloth all the way across the ceiling. Basically, what it looked like was this. So you have your wooden beams hanging down, then you have about 6 inches of space, and then you have your blue cloth running all the way across. The thing is, the air conditioning unit was not sitting at ground level in the basement. It was sitting up on a pedestal right about in this area, which would put it at the right height that if there was a leak and fugitive gas managed to escape through a pipe chase, which is visible in several photos, it could sit in this gap up at the ceiling. So when the busboy climbed up on the chair there, stuck his match up there, he accidentally ignited that flame of fugitive gas and it spread across the bar. Now, the thing is, because it spread so quickly and because this was supposed to have been treated, that blue satin was supposed to have been treated with fire resistant material, it was not. It was when it was initially installed, but that was 2 years prior. It had not been treated since then. It was supposed to be treated every 6 months. It had not been treated since then. So as soon as that flash went across the bar, it ignited basically the entire ceiling. And because it did so, it spread rapidly all the way across. And as soon as it hits the other side of the bar, that superheated gas is going to come across like this, and it's going to bank straight down. So many of the people that were sitting in chairs on the opposite side of the bar immediately died. They were hit by superheated gas, inhaled it, and died instantly because, unfortunately, that is a thing that can happen in fires. If you are hit with that, if you're standing in a fully developed fire or a nearly developed fire and get hit with that 2,000 degree Fahrenheit superheated gases, a lot of times it will kill you basically instantly. Now, many of the 400 people who were down here in this bar realized that they needed to get out. The only exit they knew of was this stairs right here. So a lot of them immediately began to run for these stairs. They would get up the stairs, and luckily there was a fire exit at the top of the stairs with panic hardware on it. Unluckily, it was locked. So they get up to the top of the stairs, they try that door, can't get out. There was another exit in the basement that was on the opposite side of the bar right here. Unfortunately, it was designed to look like the rest of the wood paneling on the wall right here so that guests wouldn't know it existed, and very few people, aside from the people that work there, actually managed to make it out this direction into the rest of the basement and survive. Now, for many people, they likely believe when they reached the stairs they were going to make it to safety, but unfortunately, that would not be the case due to an effect known as the trench effect. Now, the trench effect is a combination of two different things. It's the Coanda effect and flashover. Now, explaining the Coanda effect real quick. If you have a jet of fluid, which fire is essentially a jet of fluid, it is moving like so, right? Moving in this direction. And as it moves in this direction, it's going to pull ambient air from the outside to pull in this way, right? To flow along with it, which is going to create a lower pressure here and a lower pressure here, as well as higher pressure here and higher pressure here, which is going to feed more air. Air moves from higher pressure to lower pressure this direction. That makes sense, right? Now, if you have the same situation, but you add a surface, a solid surface right here. As this moves, continues to move this direction, you still have your low pressure here. You have your higher pressure here, which is pushing more air that direction because high pressure moves, or air moves from high pressure to low pressure. Over here, you do not have that space, but you still have the entrainment of air. So you have this low pressure, but you don't have any more air to go from high pressure to a lower pressure area. So your jet is going to bend towards this surface and travel directly along it. So in the case of the stairwell, as the fire began to get here and burn, instead of burning up and then going across like that as a normal fire would, it's going to burn and it's going to hook along the actual staircase itself. But not only is it going to burn along the staircase, all of the smoke, which is also a fluid jet, is going to go along the staircase as well, which is going to preheat the stairs and begin to off-gas as it preheats the stairs as the fire moves up. And eventually enough of it's going to off-gas that it's going to ignite all at the same time, rocket up the stairs and come up the top of the stairs and out into the main lobby of the Coconut Grove as a giant fireball, leaving the people upstairs completely unaware and surprised by the massive fireball coming out of the basement. So, in the Coconut Grove, the fire started in the basement in the Melody Lounge, and it quickly burned across the Melody Lounge and shot up the stairwell in a massive fireball over here in this corner, which shot out into the lobby over here, where a lot of people were trying to decide where in the lounge they were going to go. Were they going to go down to the Melody Lounge? Were they going to go to the main dining hall? Were they going to go to the Caricature Bar, which was rumored to be the longest bar in Boston at the time? Or were they going to go to the new Broadway Lounge over here? This area over here was offices. Now, as the fire came up, many of the people that were in the lobby decided that they needed to exit, as one does when a building is on fire. Unfortunately, the only exit they could think of was the revolving door here, because the fire's coming up this direction. This was an exit here. This was a fire exit. It had panic hardware. Unfortunately, it was locked because this is a nightclub fire. The door exits are always locked. So they attempted to come out this revolving door here. But revolving doors are not designed to allow a lot of people to exit at one time. They're specifically designed to not allow a lot of people in or out at the same time. So as all of these people attempted to climb their way through, they quickly jammed either side of this revolving door. As the fire continued to spread, people on the outside were attempting to pull people out of the revolving door, but the fire began to shoot out over their heads, and the people on top of the pile that was chest deep were burning to death, while the people on the bottom were being crushed and asphyxiated to death without ever having actually been burned. Now, the Coconut Grove had been covered in decorations that were flammable. They were covered in cloth that was hanging from the ceiling. They had fake paper palm trees everywhere that readily burned. It was essentially a cloth ceiling all the way across with a significant amount of chairs and tables and all sorts of other things that could rapidly burn. So the fire, as it came across, it flashed into the Caricature Bar. People in the main dining room here that were located here could see people in the Caricature Bar catch on fire and die. So they, realizing that they couldn't get out this direction, attempted to find a different exit. They had two options. They had this exit here, and they could go into the Broadway Lounge and out this exit over here. Now, the problem with this one is it was covered with cloth drapery, which hid the exit in the first place. But in addition, both of these doors were Venetian doors. So you had to slide them open, and they had to bend inwards to open. One of them jammed shut. So when they finally got one of them open, they had about a 2-foot exit for everyone that was in this main dining area to exit out of the building. Now, at the time, there were about 1,000 people in the club. There were only supposed to be about 460. Approximately 400 were down in the Melody Lounge, leaving about 600 in the entire upstairs area. So if we kind of generously say there's 50 in the lobby, there's 100 in the Broadway Lounge, there's 100 in the bar, that's 250. That leaves 350 in the main dining room who are trying to make it out a 2-foot exit. In addition, some of them would have ran down this hallway to try to get to the Broadway Lounge, but unfortunately, as they did so, the fire flashed across into the main dining room. It also flashed out this little exit here from the Caricature Bar and underneath here. So this wasn't an actual wall, it was about half wall. So fire flashed here. Some of them would run down this way, but as the fire came across and went into the Broadway Lounge, some people realized that this exit back over here was actually an inward swinging door. So as the fire and smoke began to exit, people tried to exit out his way, but they couldn't get the door open because too many people were jammed up against it. So some of them backtracked and attempted to go back into this hallway here as other people were trying to escape this way. They ran into each other in the hallway. It became a mini crowd crush in that hallway where a giant pile of people were found deceased after the fire. Now, one of the things about the Coconut Grove fire is there were several people who never had a chance to even make it out of their seats before they were hit by smoke and flames and heat. Now, as it burned through here and as it flashed into the Broadway Lounge, there was an individual performing on the stage in the Broadway Lounge right here, and then there was a coat check girl who was working in this area over here in one of her first shifts. She reported to authorities that as the fire was going, she was watching across the room, and eventually a bunch of people came up and started demanding their coats, and she didn't understand why before she looked past them and could see smoke starting to come out of the hallway here into the Broadway Lounge. And then just about a second later, a massive fireball shot out of the hallway and ignited the woman who was singing on stage right here, killing her instantly. In addition, over here on this terrace in the main dining hall, it was sitting up a little ways off of the actual floor itself because very famous individuals would come and the people in the main dining hall could see them up in the air so that they, could look at them. And a well-known actor by the name of Buck Jones was there that night, and he was found still next to his seat, significantly burned after the fire. He had never actually made it any farther than falling out of his seat onto the floor. There are also several reports of people that were found in chairs throughout the area with their hands still around their drink, with barely any burn wounds, but significant black marks around their nose and their mouth from where the upper level gases had descended so quickly. They breathed in those superheated gases. It immediately burned their lungs and killed them essentially instantly. Now, we've covered the exits, the actual doors from the nightclub. We have this one here that is about a 2-foot entrance that very quickly was overwhelmed with bodies. And as firefighters came up to try and pull people out, one firefighter got so close that as he was pulling people out, smoke started to come in. He started to breathe in gas and backed away. And when he realized what had happened, his gloves had been pulled off, but also he had nail marks on his legs from people clawing at his legs to pull them out of the fire. In addition, similar thing happened over here once they finally got this door open. And this one here, firefighters were trying to pull people out of the revolving door, but they were pulling off chunks of skin as people were burning alive in the doorway. Now, the other exits from nightclubs are usually windows, and the Coconut Grove was no different. Well, it was kind of different. There were essentially 6 usable windows in the nightclub. Well, there would be 4 usable windows in the nightclub. There were 4 here in the caricature bar along this way. The problem was all 4 of them were covered with blinds, and essentially no one knew where they were there, so no one attempted to use them as an exit. There were 2 other windows in the Broadway Lounge over here. All of those windows were glass blocks. Now, several people inside the Broadway Lounge attempted to break out the glass blocks to use them as an exit. Essentially, none of them were successful, and many of them who attempted to do so perished right there. Now, on top of all of this, several people managed to successfully make it out of the club. They had been inside, they made it out of the club, and as soon as they hit the fresh air, they took a deep breath and then dropped dead on the pavement. Essentially, they had inhaled so much superheated gas that as soon as they got outside, it overcame their nervous system and they dropped dead on the pavement. Now, just to add another layer of ridiculous to this fire, there was no alarm system, there was no sprinkler system, there were no fire extinguishers, there was nothing like that. And 8 days prior to the fire, it had been inspected by the fire department, who in their one-page report said there were sufficient exits, there were sufficient extinguishers, there were no flammable decorations, and everything in the club was in good working order. It was literally 1 page of about 128 words, and some of those words were his name, rank, and hello and goodbye. The Coconut Grove Nightclub Fire still remains the deadliest nightclub fire in world history.